Hi there and welcome back, YouTubers. Welcome to video number 3 of Small Engines Questions and Answers. Before I get started today, I just want to show you a Kubota lawnmower. So here's a Kubota lawnmower. It's about 15 years old. I rarely see these, model W5019. They're made in Japan. This one has a bad carb, so you can only buy the whole carburetor. You can't buy just the needle and seat for it. So it's built pretty tough, but really hard to get parts for. Now our first question for today is regarding a grass trimmer. The question is, Don, you changed the gas in the tank. This was in a previous weed eater repair video, but could you still have bad fuel in the carb if you didn't drain it? That could give you problems till you burn through it. The answer is yes, you could still have a few problems if there's a bit of old gas left in there, and I'll show you what I do for that. Let's say I did this in this Echo trimmer. I would remove the air filter cover right off so that you can see the intake of the carburetor. Then I use my flammable penetrating oil, which I've showed you in my previous videos. Then I would spray some in the carb. It's convenient with this little spray stick. And then I'd start it up and repeat the process. And I would just repeat the process until she runs fine. Now after doing this 5-6 times, and it will only run on the sprayed gas or oil, whatever you put in there, then you know there's bigger issues. The easiest and cheapest way to get started on that is to remove the fuel cap, check the filter and the fuel lines in the tank going to the carburetor. If that doesn't do it, then you know you've got carburetor issues. The next question is, how do you seal the fuel lines that come out of the fuel tank from a grass trimmer so that fuel doesn't leak out? Well, you don't need to put any silicone or anything on there. I'll just show you a couple weed eaters here and show you what to do. So most people have the type where the fuel lines come out of the tank like this, and you don't need anything to seal the fuel from leaking out of the fuel tank. It's probably because the fuel lines have gone bad and they're not tight in the hole in the fuel tank where the fuel line comes out of. The fuel lines have to be really tight coming out of these holes here, and that's all that prevents the fuel from leaking out of the fuel tank. On some other models like the Echo, you may see a grommet there and all the fuel lines come out of there. So if it's leaking fuel around here, you may want to replace the grommet when you replace the fuel lines. If the fuel lines have gotten hard like this one, they're going to need to be replaced. This one's got a crack in there, so I'll make a video in the future about that. But if the lines are really hard and brittle, it may cause a leak here because they're not sealing tight around the holes. One of the best fuel lines that I use is Tygon. It's yellow and it resists swelling and hardening. Last question for today's video is, I was wondering if you could show us an easy way of checking a 2-cycle engine for proper vacuum sealing. Obviously, if your crankcase won't hold vacuum, then you can't get fuel into the cylinder. I have a nearly new Poulan chainsaw I got at a yard sale, which seems not to be able to get gas into the cylinder. Well, I'll show you a couple saws and show you what might be the problem for that. So here's a Poulan here. I'm not sure if it's the same model as was in the question. You would then check all the fuel lines that go to the primer, make sure they're all connected. You would also check the fuel lines that go to the carburetor. One goes to the primer bulb and the other goes to the filter in the fuel tank. You would make sure that they're tight on the connectors. You would also make sure that the carburetor is not loose on its mount, because that could cause a problem. You could do that by checking these two nuts here. Make sure that the primer bulb is not cracked. Make sure you don't see excessive oil leaks down at the bottom of the cylinder. So here's a power head from another engine. If you have this saw all apart, you would make sure that all the gaskets in that are good, especially the base gasket here. Another problem could be that it's losing air through one of the crank seals over here. Also, the sump cover here, you would want to make sure that it's not leaking oil, because it could be leaking air as well. And if you have adapters that go here, you would make sure that they're all sealed with a gasket as well. Make sure that your compression is good. Take the muffler off and look inside the port to make sure the rings aren't scored. Steel chainsaws, they have an impulse line that goes from the cylinder to the carburetor. You would want to make sure that that line is good. So if you can't get fuel to your carburetor, to the engine, you may want to replace the carb kit. This saw here has a Walbro carburetor. The kit repair for that is number K10 watt. If you have a Zama, it's going to be a different number, so make sure before you get a kit that you know if it's a Walbro or a Zama carburetor. And also make sure that when you pull the cord over that the compression feels pretty good. We have some videos where I replace the carb kit in this saw here. You can go and check out these videos. Usually replacing the crank seals are a last option. Carburetor is usually first, including the fuel lines. But usually your fuel lines will still be good on these saws here. So try that first. Check your filter in the fuel tank and you should be in business. So thanks for watching. Keep sending the questions. I can't answer every question that comes to me through email because sometimes you basically have to see the unit to give a proper diagnosis. See you next time.